You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Hi, I'm Zach Waters, and welcome to another episode of WTF-STOP Photo Talk, where I chat to photographers about their life and connection to the world through photography. Today's guest is photographer Mark Cohen, who is recognised for his unconventional and experimental approach to image making. His work spans portraiture, fashion and documentary photography, often pushing the boundaries of traditional composition, especially with his street photography. Born in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania in 1943, Cohen's photographic journey has been deeply rooted in his hometown and the surrounding areas. To support himself financially, Cohen operated a commercial photography studio in his hometown of Wilkes-Barre for over 35 years, focusing on wedding photography and portraits. Cohen's style is renowned for his surreal close-up street photography, where he often crops and faces or fragments bodies like he is searching for a deeper meaning and understanding from the seemingly ordinariness of people and places he comes across on the streets. His work embodies a rare immediacy, almost intrusive, yet deeply evocative and engaging with his subjects. In 2005, he published Grim Street with Powerhouse in New York, which solidified his reputation as a master of surreal, close-up, flash-driven street photography. The book brought wider recognition to his raw, fragmented, and often unsettling depictions of everyday life in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. True Color, published in 2007, again by Powerhouse in New York, is also a significant photo book in Mark Cohen's career because it marks his transition from black and white to colour photography while maintaining his signature close-up, flash-heavy style. The images in True Color were mostly taken in the 1970s, but they remained largely unpublished until this book. This gives insight into a previously hidden aspect of Cohen's work and his early engagement with colour film. His other books include 5 Minutes in Mexico, Photographs 1989, Dark Knees, published in 2013, which was a comprehensive look at his black and white work from 1969 to 2012. Frame, a retrospective released in 2015. This retrospective includes over 250 images, many previously unpublished, spanning Cohen's extensive career on various locations around the world. Mexico, published in 2016. This book presents Cohen's photographic exploration of Mexico, capturing the essence of its street and people. Cotton, published in 2021. This photo book delves into the cultural and social aspects of the American South, featuring images that reflect the region's complexities. Groundworks, published in 2024. This recent work showcases Cohen's continual exploration of urban landscapes. I was delighted that you took the time to have a chat. We talked about that engagement he has on the streets, which is sometimes criticised by people I've seen on social media, which I think is a little bit unfair because you need to know a little bit more about his approach. But we discussed it and talked about how he interacts with people on the street.
You're invading somebody's personal space.
Yes.
And it can create all kinds of problems. But sometimes I'm walking on the street and people are on the street and I see a guy and I'll have like a special ring on his hand, let's say, as an example. I'm not thinking of a specific picture. And I'll say, I'm trying to get a picture of that ring. You know what I mean? And then I'll just put the camera very close to the ring and take a picture. And if it's a flash picture, it really disturbs the scene, you know, because I like to take pictures of a lot of flash pictures made in the twilight. So there's this ambient light in the background and the flash picture in the foreground. So and then I want to back away from, or if there's a kid in the picture, you know, like I take a picture of a kid's face and then I back away from it, you know. So my interactions with the people, extremely short.
We also talked about his time teaching at university.
I would make up these abstract assignments for them sometimes. As we'll go out and make pictures of something that's white or something. That was one. And they would come back with all these different pictures. And a lot of these are like math majors, or they're nursing majors, or they're history majors, But one of the things that was so effective in talk is like to have these critiques where some student could come and put 10 of his pictures up on tack them up on a board, and the class is like 10 or 12 people. I guess the teaching skill was to run a conversation about the actual pictures that we're making, on the shortcomings or the positive things about.
As I mentioned earlier on in the intro, Mark was a wedding and portrait photographer for over 30 years in Wilkes-Barre in Pennsylvania. What I was intrigued with was, did his unconventional street style seep into his wedding photography?
Oh, there was. Yeah. I did a wedding once where people were so annoyed that they sent the pictures to the museum in New York because they knew I had some connection to that museum. Yeah. And they wrote a nasty letter about it.
Really? What? Tell us about that. And we also discussed his use of verticals in his Mexico book published in 2016, because I wasn't used to seeing him shooting so many verticals. Was there a conscious effort with the verticals in the Mexico stuff?
Yeah, sure, it was conscious. I mean, I would see things that I want. I have a picture of a kid walking down the street, and my wife is driving the car, and I'm sitting on the passenger side with the window open, and this kid's walking, and the street's very narrow. And I turn the camera vertical, and it's like, I know this kid's going to come down. And he looked right at the lens, and I take the picture, and he's sort of scowling, I wanted to get the whole kid, and I got it.
Yeah.
Which page, but I'm not sure.
Anyway, the day came, and I asked him what he was up to.
I'm editing a book of color photographs. I have a possible publication coming out of all unpublished color photographs, because my color work sort of emerged in about 1980 or 1985. I was making black and white pictures for maybe 20 years, and then I started to experiment a little bit with color film.
Yeah.
That happened because they started to make negative color films that were ASA 400, which is the same as Triac. So I could go out and take color pictures without bothering with an exposure meter or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was using the same medium, actually, except I'd had these color negatives.
Yeah.
And I never printed many of them. It was very expensive to make color prints, and I was making 16 by 20 prints.
Yeah.
I wanted to continue along that line, not to change anything, just to keep the medium going, because I had been very successful with Grimm Street. I mean, it became a book that I think a lot of people know about now.
Yeah.
And I had the dummy for that book done 20 years before I had it printed, before I could get that printed. So now I'm making a book of this publisher wants all unpublished color pictures that I've made. I'm working on that now, and scanning negatives that were never printed.
What are you scanning them on?
A V600 Epson scanner. I have an Epson 10,000, a big scanner to do 16 by 20 print.
Yeah.
So I could take the prints right out of the boxes.
Yeah.
And make scans of these black and white prints. But I needed something to do 35 millimeter negatives. So I made some kind of jury rig mask, because I like to have the frame lines in the picture. So one at a time, I'm scanning these negatives that have never been printed. That's going to be a cool book.
Where'd you store your archive then?
Right in this room here, I have these boxes filled with pictures.
You got filing cabinets full.
I want to get rid of it. In some way, I want to just get rid of all these pictures, because my kids, they're interested in other things. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, it's like, it's going to be a problem, because there's some beautiful pictures that I made in 1970 and 71 and 68 and 69. All those prints are just not interesting. I've been in all these galleries. I've been in 10 galleries, and they're selling the same half dozen negatives, the bubble gum and the jump rope and the upside down girl. Those things sell. I've sold like 5 or 6 or 10 or some. Or the bubble gum, I must have sold like 20 prints of that. I'm sort of stuck with all this work, but I guess some way I'll get it to a museum or someplace that wants to look. And that's just the prints. The prints, 2% of the negatives. We've got thousands and thousands of negatives. black and white negatives. So now I have these color negatives, and I'm making a book of color pictures that were never even printed.
How do you go about the editing process? I do see in your books that you edit by date, don't you?
I'm not that careful. I sort of leave a lot of that up to the publisher, and chronological dating seems good both in some kind of psychological way. I mean, this is the series of pictures that I took, and once in a while there's an issue that is it's not exactly able to be understood chronologically, or I don't know what the motive for any of these pictures is. I just like to take pictures, so I go out and I put a roll of film in and I start making these pictures. So when I started making color pictures, I tried in this silly way to not really understand whether I had color film in the camera or black and white film in the camera, because the motive for the picture was much stronger than the colors of the picture. I thought, you see something red, I don't know how to really go into that without actually talking about a specific picture.
Yeah.
Had a picture like cut into this conversation, it's like a book of art, and it says see picture on page 900 and you're on page 30. You want to have the picture next to the text in a certain.
I mean, I think you're a surrealist. I've always thought when I look the way you work, your imagery and the way it comes together, the sequences, to me, you're a surrealist. I don't know how you see that.
I feel that way too. I mean, I'm making an awful lot of pictures without looking through the camera. Just putting the camera into the space that I think the picture is happening in.
I think you can see that a lot with, obviously, Grim Street, which was the seminal piece. I mean, it's an amazing body of work. It was like your first album in a way, even though I don't think it was your first book. And I think everybody refers to that with you. But actually, I see a lot more. I see a different you with your work and the way your books have progressed, the way you've changed your style a little bit and kept on incorporating that maybe, say, off the hip style as well. But just going back to the colour, when you started playing with colour neg, was it the Kodak Vericolor 400 you were using?
Yeah, Vericolor was 400 and then I went up to Fuji 1600.
Yeah, that scared me a little bit when I saw that. It's quite grainy, isn't it? How did you deal with that?
It's okay. It looks more like a Russian publication, Samizdat, I always thought, like throw one of these books together, without all that super fine printing that they've, the technology, it's like you want to almost print it on newspaper.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about Grim Street. But what made me change, one of the things that made me change in the Grim Street time, which was about 73, 74, 75.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
At that time, when I started, like in 1968, I was using a 21 millimeter lens because I was very influenced by William Klein. And his pictures, they're so fantastic, I think.
Yeah.
And Robert Fink and
Freelander.
Not so much Freelander as Tony Ray Jones or Larry Burroughs, David Douglas Duncan's war pictures. You wanted to get into the scene really, but I was never, more than 25 miles from Wilkes-Barre.
Yeah.
So I was in this set that was, between these two coal towns, Wilkes-Barre and Scranton. And I would walk around and make these pictures, but I was very, very close to things. And after a while, I got into altercations with people, because I was like inches away, what I mean? Which one laid more? Your lens would put me back a little bit. And then after about 5 years of that, I switched to a 50. And once you're using a 50 millimeter lens, it's like almost a telephoto lens. You're really back from the scene and different things start to happen.
In your True Color book, is there a mix of the Vericolor and the Fuji in that?
No, I don't think so. I started using Fuji after True Color was was published. True Color came about very quickly. It was after the Grimm Street book came out. Powerhouse said, well, let's make a True Color book, or a color book. So I made this book, very quickly. I made the prints myself, and they scanned the prints that I made. And I was only learning to make I tried to make a set of 8x10 color prints.
Yeah.
And they scanned them a little too perfectly. So the next color book will be better. I mean, the colors will be more realistic, let's say.
Yeah. It's funny, I chuckled when you said you get into altercations with people. And I've read in the things you've spoken to people about the way you used to, the way you're shooting, getting really up close and then using your flash. And I always wondered if that was part of the course when you were doing that sort of photography. I presume it's happened a lot, but I actually watched you there's a few YouTube videos about, and I was sort of watching, I wasn't watching you taking a picture, I was watching you and the way you interact. There's a sort of barrier there totally. What I noticed is that you eye the shot, you eye the person, you're looking, you get in, you're waiting for your moment. And the second you shoot, you disengage totally. You just walk. There's no sort of going back a little bit and sort of trying to justify it.
You're invading somebody's personal space.
Yes.
And it can create all kinds of problems. But sometimes I'm walking on the street and people are on the street and I see a guy and I'll have like a special ring on his hand, let's say, as an example. I'm not thinking of a specific picture. And I'll say, I'll try to get a picture of that ring. You know what I mean? And then I'll just put the camera very close to the ring and take a picture. And if it's a flash picture, it really disturbs the scene. Because I like to take pictures of a lot of flash pictures made in the twilight. So there's this ambient light in the background and the flash picture in the foreground. And then I want to back away from, or if there's a kid in the picture, like I take a picture of a kid's face and then I back away from it, So my interactions with the people, extremely short, in times of seconds. I take a flash picture and I move away, and I haven't really even seen the picture. I don't see the picture till I pull the film off the reel in dark.
Right.
So I can see that it's come out, and then I said, well, that's possible and that's possible. And then I can make a print from a few of those negatives. And the same thing was happening with color later on, because I would walk around town, I made a game out of it. I take the film and I walk into the drugstore and I could have the negatives and the prints done in an hour anywhere in the country here. Every drugstore had a 1 hour machine. And all those machines are gone now, because I'm not really sure what I'm doing. There's phenomenology is real. It's a real thing that happens when you take a picture on a sunny day. It's not the same as when you take a picture when there's lightning in the sky. It's not the same.
Yeah.
So if something changes, I cannot describe it.
Going back to your approach and everything, and I think in today's social media world, I've read the obvious criticisms in the way, the intrusiveness of taking pictures like that, but photography is an intrusive medium. It is, whatever way you look at it, is an intrusive form. I think sometimes people have missed the point with you. Just like when you photograph kids, people now can say, dodgy photographing children. I think your photography has less to do about the subjects. It's more about you. It's more about that abstractness of the way you're seeing the world. It's relevant whether it's a sort of woman with her legs in high heels or a kid lying on a towel on the grass or whatever. There's actually less to do with what the subject represents in gender or age or anything. It's more about what abstract qualities they're bringing to the pavement and the sidewalk and in the street. How do you see that?
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of the work sometimes is autobiographical in some way. There's some part of my personality, some part of myself that is drawn to express itself in the subjects I pick.
Yeah.
But I have, like Grimm Street's 100 pictures. Yeah. That's not a lot of pictures because it's drawn from 1,000 negatives. Yeah. I used to put negatives away in a sleeve called NCNP, which meant no contacts, no prints, because I was running a photography studio at the time I was doing it. I mean, I used up every minute, it seemed. So I tried to make a contact print of every strip that I made a print from. So the contact prints I have are of strips of 6 or 5 where there's a print on most of them. there's hundreds of strips that I never made any print of. I didn't have time to contact them.
Yeah.
So I just bunched them into a glassine and said, no contacts, no print. So I went back to those glassine, those sleeves of unprinted, and there's a lot of good work there, but there's only so much that you could emerge with, unless you have like a couple guys, like in the movie Blow Up, the guy walks in and he throws the film on the desk and he goes to the bar and it's all done with a bunch. Make me 11 by 14 of each one of these, so I can see what I've been doing. Well, I couldn't do it. That was like very romantic notion. Yeah. David Hemmings, and I saw that movie. That's a great movie. It's, I saw that movie like in 75-ish, at about that time.
Wow.
So I couldn't print all those negatives. My thing is to get these negatives and prints and cut the whole thing out of this apartment, and have somebody like scan it all or see it all. And then the autobiographical nature of this work will emerge.
There's another side of you as well, isn't there? And that's what I want to sort of head towards now. I want you to take me back to where it all started for you as a young man growing up in Pennsylvania. I'd like to find out as well about you as a commercial photographer. You had your own studio, you did weddings and corporate work, I presume?
Yes.
That's the side I have no idea about. Can we start from the beginning and work into that Mark Cohen wedding photographer? Because I'm intrigued by this.
I started off, somebody gave me a camera when I was like 12 or something. I learned how to use the camera, take pictures, develop the film. A cousin gave me this camera and my uncle showed me how to make a test strip in the darkroom. And I was in high school, and the first kind of idea that I got about photography being a real thing in the world, and this is like in 1957 or 58, Eastman Kodak high school photo contest. And I was a winner. I sent the stuff in and I thought, well, this was pretty real. By the time I could drive a car, I was making portraits of little kids for people near Wilkes-Barre. And I made these 16 by 20 portraits of them. I used a 90 millimeter lens. That way I could do a headshot and make a 16 by 20 quite easily in my darkroom. And that was a big seller, and a couple of 8 by 10s along with it. That's how I started a photo business. And it was pretty successful for a small town. And I did corporate work and annual reports. And then I had to do some weddings too, because it's a small town. And I did all these things. In between all that, I made the work that's the real work. So to start making 16 by 20 prints of negatives that I made when I was out for a walk was not a big technical problem for me because I had been making them of these kids, and dry mounting to a board and selling them. And around this time, there was this show in Rochester, New York, at the George Eastman House. A guy named Nathan Lyons put together a show called Vision and Expression. And I was in this show, and I went up to Rochester, and I saw the installation of the show. I noticed immediately that a 16 by 20 took up more room in the gallery. It's in an 8 by 10. And I just stuck with the 16 by. So that became a format. And I still use this format today, exactly the same size prints, and the same film, and the same developer. But now I'm in Philadelphia, so I'm in a different place now. Once I started to have shows in New York, I began to realize some income from those shows. Then after that, I had a great gallery in California, and that was when the True Color portfolio was made. And they are superb prints. I could see the potential of a color negative because I had a dye transfer printer at that time, Guy Strickers, who's out in Seattle, and he made these prints for Michael Wilson. So that's when I saw the potential in these negatives. And now I can see how to scan them.
Don't know much about dye transfer printing.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it, except they take a 35 millimeter negative and then they make an 8 by 10 inner negative of some sort. And then they make the dyes. I don't do it anymore. They're incredibly expensive to make one. And it's a disappearing thing. And a lot of people are talking about how inkjet print, like digital dye pigment prints are just as permanent. I don't know about that. I'm a black and white printer. I mean, I know how to make take a Tri-X negative and make a beautiful print out, or any kind of 35 millimeter. I mean, that my enlarger doesn't move. It's all set up to make one size print. I have another enlarger right next to it to make others.
Going back to that camera you were given a Leica 3F. That must have been like gold dust then, was it?
No, the first camera I was given was a plastic, camera that used 127 film.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Which was a strange film size. And I fooled around with the camera. Remember, I'm only like 13 or 14 years old. I took a picture of a cat chasing a ball on a string and things like this. And I was just fooling with this camera. But I couldn't understand how to load in the dark to load the tank. So I would take the rolls of film to the drugstore and have them develop at a lab in Wilkes-Barre. Just developed it. I remember it cost 11 cents. Developed the film. Then I had the negatives and I could enlarge them years before I was very comfortable loading a 35 millimeter stainless steel reel. That's what I do now. It's a long arc, because it's many years, and it's a long arc from, when you're first learning how to work in your own darkroom. And I always had a darkroom.
When you look back when you first started and how you stumbled your way through it all, it's such a beautiful period, isn't it? When you look back at them early times where you would just spend days in the darkroom and you were shooting pictures. Were you bulk loading film as well?
I tried that for a while, but not too long.
Yeah, it's a bit scary, isn't it?
Load the reels, everything. I might have done a couple 100 feet and then said, I'm not doing it. It's nice to get the film in the package.
I can't even get them onto spools when they come out of the canister when you've shot them. That scares me, that process. I do it, but it's just, oh my God, I'm just so scared of it all.
What process?
When you're putting the film out of the camera into the roll to develop it.
Oh, well, no, the whole canister comes out. I take it in the dark when I have a pliers. I open it up with the pliers and put it on the reel. It takes a minute.
Yeah, you make it sound so easy.
Well, the same. You have to I'm a great believer in limitation. It's like.
Yeah, but then they brought, you remember we had the traditional plastics buckets, what you put your film in. Then they brought the metal ones out, which right. I just could not get my head around. I think I was just too precious on that process. I was so nervous about the next step of taking the film out the camera.
I remember that. The tank used to be plastic with some kind of plastic reels inside. And then when the stainless steel reels came out, they were a little tricky at first.
Yeah.
Because I used to teach photography. When I was living in Wilkes-Barre, there were a couple of small colleges. There was a King's College, and I started teaching there. And I set up a darkroom there. The guys had made a nifty darkroom for me, and I taught photography there for a few years. Then there was another small college in Wilkes-Barre called Wilkes College. And I was teaching there too. So I liked always to talk. I only would teach basic photography. I would teach kids how to make a test strip, and how to look at the finished prints. I did that for 20 years, like part-time. Then I did some teaching, and I went to Princeton for a semester, and I went to the Corcoran down in Washington for a year. I think I taught about 2 semesters down there. And then I was at RISD for a couple in Providence. I went to RISD when Harry Callahan and Aaron Siskin were teaching at RISD.
Yeah.
Somehow they said, well, get this guy to come up there. So I went up to RISD for a year and taught up there. But I never would take like a full-time professor job because it's very distracting. I mean, if you're at RISD and you're talking to students, they want to know what gallery exactly they can go to tomorrow, in New York. They're very ambitious in these schools. And that wasn't, I got to all the galleries because I had a show at the Museum of Modern Art when I was 30. You know what I mean? And that was a little spacey to have that happen.
No, I noticed that. Museum of Modern Art, I was like, wow. And you were so young as well.
Yeah.
What were you teaching? Because I noticed you did a lot of university, as you just mentioned, you did a lot of university lecturing, teaching and stuff. What was the range of stuff you were actually delivering there?
I would make up these abstract assignments for them sometimes. As we'll go out and make pictures of something that's white or something. That was one. And they would come back with all these different pictures. And a lot of these are like math majors, or they're nursing majors, or they're history majors, you know. But one of the things that was so effective in talk is like to have these critiques where some student could come and put 10 of his pictures up on tack them up on a board, and the class is like 10 or 12 people. I guess the teaching skill was to run a conversation about the actual pictures that we're making, on the shortcomings or the positive things about them. So I did this for a while. It was pretty good, I guess.
You sort of learn a lot as well, don't you, when you're doing?
Yeah, you learn a lot about yourself. You know, you learn a lot about.
Totally.
I don't know. You know, there was nothing like getting in a car and driving 2 miles from home and parking the car and walking around the block. There was no motive at all except to use up this swamp to take these pictures. I knew I was doing, you know, and I knew I was doing something that was unusual at the time I was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I could take a box of pictures to New York and people would say, they would look at them. One of the first classes I had, and I took one class in New York at the School of Visual Arts with a guy named Ken Hyman, who was a photojournalist. And he was a really good photographer. And he looked at my work and immediately said, well, take this work over to John Sarkowski at the Museum of Modern Art. And so I did. You know, I would have conversations with him over a period of a few years, you know. And in these trips to New York, I began to understand that I was really doing something that was unusual, even in New York. And so just how this happened, I just kept making pictures.
When you see other people starting to believe in your work, that gives you the self-belief, I guess.
Oh, sure.
Having somebody in the establishment as well, having that belief gives you a purpose. And I guess it's the same with your students. You have to show belief in what they're doing and they need to embody them and give them purpose to take something from what you're giving them.
It's funny in an interview like this, or in this conversation we're having, because what's happening, things come into focus a little more clearly than they really deserve to be, because walking around the block and taking pictures is a much stronger impression than developing the film and seeing the film the same day. I did a lot of this stuff in real time. You know, I take pictures on Tuesday morning and make prints on Tuesday night. And that was more inspiring to me to see my own work emerge as a 16 by 20 print ready for the big city than to have a successful class or a successful critique. You know, teaching was never for me as interesting as what I was doing all by myself at the time I was making these pictures. But I could do the teaching, you know, because I like to, you know, there were some positive aspects about it. You know, just like the photography business, you know, sell some lady, you know, $200 worth of pictures, and that was something. You know what I mean? We had some value to take, you know, but the basic value was to develop the film and take the film off the stainless steel and see the negatives up against the light, you know, soaking wet just after they're washed, and say, there's stuff on this roll. And I would do that and still do that. It's harder to, you know, I just did a book in Japan today called Groundwork. And that should be out in April from Super Labo, you know, the publisher Super Labo.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah. Is that the publisher you've had Cotton with?
Right.
Is that the same publisher?
Yes.
They've got some amazing books, actually.
Well, the guy, strange publisher.
Yeah, but I love that about the Japanese.
Yeah. Daido Moriyama is a great photographer. I mean, the guy is absolutely insane, you know what I mean? He takes pictures like he breathes, you know? I mean, I don't know him, you know? I see his picture.
I just went to his exhibition in London.
Yeah.
It was amazing. The photographer's gallery, every single floor, even the lift was him.
Even the lift.
And I videoed every bit of it, but I haven't put it online yet.
Yeah.
I looked a right weirdo walking around the photographer's gallery. They even had a reading room. The books in the reading room were so rare. They were worth a fortune. And anybody could just walk in and read them.
Yeah.
When you were doing the commercial work as a wedding photographer, obviously it's a very different style to what you were developing on the street. Was it? Or did it ever cross over? I don't know anything about your commercial side. Tell me about it.
The first weddings I did were 35 millimeter black and white, you know what I mean? And I would try to cover the wedding like I was with Magnum or somebody like that. You know what I mean? Like it was a wedding of the print or something. You know, and I made these, and they were people loved them. You know, they were these very candid weddings. And, you know, I just did them with make an album of about 30 pictures, let's say, and I'd give them contact prints. Well, after a while, that didn't work out so good because it's hard to make a nice group shot with a 35 millimeter negative. So I had to go up to bigger negatives and a bigger flash. You know what I mean? I had to have I had a super, I don't know the name of it, but it was like a number of 5 flash bulb when it went off. There was a bright strobe. And so that became like an abstract thing, but it was very lucrative to do a wedding at that time. And then I just got tired of it. You know what I mean? It's like the worst thing that you can ask a photographer to do is to do a wedding. Gary Winograd, I think, shot a wedding or two.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of that. So, I mean, the wedding photography was just, I had the equipment so I could do it, you know, and people would get divorced and say, give me a call and say, what do you want me to do with this album?
So you were following the traditional footpath and style, were you, in your wedding photography and stuff, and your commercial work?
Yeah, the bride throws the bouquet.
Yeah. So there was there never the real Mark Cohen creeping in on that?
Oh, there was, yeah. I did a wedding once where people were so annoyed that they sent the pictures to the museum in New York because they knew I had some connection to that museum. Yeah. And they wrote a nasty letter about it.
Really? What? Tell us about that. Tell us about that.
Well, I have the letter, but I haven't looked at it 25 or 40 years, you know.
Yeah.
But they forwarded the letter to me from the museum back to me, and they said, you're not going to think about this wedding business, you know. Because I wouldn't think nothing, you know, I took a picture of the bouquet in a bride's hand. I thought that was very cool, you know, but their head wasn't in it. Danny.
I was thinking that, you know, like, dear sir, why was the photographer right close to the bride when she was eating the cake?
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah. You know, I thought, well, I take one for me and one for them, you know, but it didn't work out so good. Now, I'm much better on the street. You know, I would go to Mexico. The first time I went to Mexico City, it was so phenomenal for me to go to that city, which is such an exciting city. And to start taking pictures there. So I made like 10 trips to Mexico City or to Mexico. Some of them, Oaxaca and Veracruz. And I went to Merida, and took pictures in these places. And when you walk on the street in Mexico City, that's a surrealistic city because you'll see things happen there that you won't see in Chicago or New York, I think. It's a fantastic city. I was in London. I took pictures in London for 6 weeks in 1975.
Yeah.
I made a great set of pictures of London. It lays in a box here, you know. But you can't make this work unless you think it's good, you know. And so It's not like Wilkes-Barre. It's different. Or Scranton.
Did you have 2 books published in Mexico? I saw the Texas University one, which was about 10 years ago. What was there another one before that?
Well, the book at Texas University was made by Xavier Barral in Paris, and it was like a deal between them. But I did a book called 5 Minutes in Mexico.
That's it. That's the one. I've not seen that book.
Yeah, well, it's like one of these books that was made quick, and there's no real binding on it. And that's why I was eager to have a real book about Mexico. And so that book is the book in Texas. The University of Texas Press has it. And you could probably get it from the Atelier Xavier Barral
Yeah.
in Paris. And that's a beautiful book because he, that guy, Xavier Barral knew how to make a book. I mean, I took the pictures in a box, a set of like 100 8x10s. And we looked at it in his office and he looked at it and he said, oh, good, it's the book here. And he will take care of it. You know what I mean? And he knew, and he just let him make a book. I mean, he was really terrific at making. I mean, he made the Dark Knees book too.
Yeah. The Mexico book is the Texas University book, I'll say, because I haven't obviously seen the 5-minute book. I find the style of work you shot, the way you shot it, very different to Grimm Street, even though your abstractness was there, everything. For me, your work's quite dream sequency, a lot of it. I find it very surreal. When I looked at the Mexico book, there was a lot of verticals, which I didn't associate with you at all as a vertical shooter. Has your style changed as you've got older?
Yeah, I got to the point, like by 1980, I was already, like I had been in these situations where I was working too close. A camera like a Leica or a Nikon, these cameras are made to be held horizontally. To make a vertical picture, it's like you have to stop and take a rest.
Yeah.
Cartier-Bresson could do it, and I would try to do it sometimes, but it's much slower, to make a vertical picture, to rotate the camera, whereas horizontally, it's like much more fluid.
Natural.
And most of my pictures were horizontal. I think all of Grimm Street's horizontal. I don't, not much. Yeah, it must be.
Talking about the style in Mexico, as I'm saying, I felt there was a separation, there was a distance between you and the subject more, as going back to the Grimm Street stuff. I felt you were doing that in true colour. And that's what initially, when we first started talking, when I said everybody, when they talk about your work, they always go to Grimm Street. They always go to that in-your-face, off-the-hip sort of work. And I said, I see a different Mark Cohen. I see a Mark Cohen who's changed his style somewhat, but also changed the way and he approaches. And you can start seeing that with your true colour book. Because if you actually look at your true colour book, yes, you've got the abstractness, you've got that close up, you've got the in your face, but actually you step away a lot in your shots. You move away from, you sort of put some distance there.
But the true color book is made at the same time as the Grimm Street book.
Yeah.
But the Grimm Street book, the dummy for the Grimm Street book was started at least 10 years before that, or 15 years before.
Yeah.
I didn't make color pictures till about 1974, like 25. I started using color for negative film. I always shot a roll of Kodachrome and lost all those. When I would go someplace, I would go to Spain, like when I was younger, I got to shoot a roll of Kodachrome, what I mean? And then that's all gone. I understand what you're saying. I started to move back. The altercation instances were increasing. At the time, the whole psychology of intrusion was changing. The whole public consciousness of abused by video cameras and television cameras. Even in 1970, there's a guy coming with the camera. There's an association with there's a sexuality that is catalyzed by seeing a person with a camera in everybody's mind in some way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. Was it because of colour as well that you stepped back a little bit?
No.
No, okay.
No,
it's interesting.
It was time.
Yeah.
I mean, the difference between 1970 and 1980 over those 10 years, there's a lot of biographical change in myself.
Yeah. And the true colour really shows a different side to you in terms of, for me anyway, your type compositions moving backwards, the man in the car, the kids looking out the car with the church cross at the right-hand side, the subdued sort of greeny buildings. They give the viewer a little bit more freedom to just breathe a little bit in your shot. And that's what I was getting at in terms of, we always go back to Grimm Street when anybody looks at you and talks about you, but actually look at the rest of his work. He doesn't just do that. He steps away. Your compositions, whether you're still shooting for the hip or not, you've moved backwards a little bit and you've put some space in between the subject. And I started seeing that in true colour. When I looked at the true colour work, I started seeing a different side of you. And I just wondered if that was the colour which was making you do that as well. But then when we get to Mexico, I'm seeing something else happening with the vertical, with a lot of verticals. I'm still seeing the same sort of style, the space between the subject. Was there a conscious effort with the verticals in the Mexico stuff?
Yeah, sure, it was conscious. I mean, I would see things that I want. I have a picture of a kid walking down the street, and my wife is driving the car, and I'm sitting on the passenger side with the window open, and this kid's walking, and the street's very narrow. And I turn the camera vertical, and it's like, I know this kid's going to come down. And he looked right at the lens, and I take the picture, and he's sort of scowling, I wanted to get the whole kid, and I got it.
Yeah.
Which page, but I'm not sure. But it's in there, a kid walking down the street, and I'm taking a picture from the car window. And then in color, I have a picture that I took myself through a car window. I was drifting with my car and had the window down. I could pick the camera up and make a vertical picture of a kid on a skateboard. I think that's in true color. Kid on a skateboard, and you can see the mirror of the car. But it's got nothing to do with color film. The colors are, but Kodak put the colors in there, or, you know what I mean? That the incident is what's on. And those are two good pictures to compare side to side. One is color film, one's black and white. And it's the same sort of picture taken through a car window of a kid on a skateboard in one sense.
Yeah.
And the other one is a kid walking down a hill in Cuernavaca in another sense. So we've got to put those on the screen to talk about them, in an auditorium or something.
Yeah.
When you're making a lecture.
You shot Mexico black and white. I thought it would have lent itself to color.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I never even thought. I took a couple rolls of color when I went down there. But, I'm doing this color book, and I'm talking about it, and I'm thinking I don't want to put the word color in the title. Because this guy has modern color, this guy has true color, this guy has ants. Always put color in the title. They're beautiful prints. I mean, dye transfer of color print is quite something to see.
Yeah.
And you can make a great type C print too. I was printing color in the darkroom when I learned how to make a color test strip.
Yeah.
Now I don't do that. I just print black and white and scan color negative.
I think the Mexico book, it looks like the way it's designed is it's almost like a photo album. The size of the prints, they look like 7x5, all of the images. And it just looks like a photo album. There's no real narrative to it, but I think it still reflects the way you work. And the book itself, for me, is more like just incidents. It just feels like dream sequences again, like things which are like memories in your head, which are reflecting in your head, and you're shooting what's going on in your head.
Yeah, maybe a dream sequence is good because, and the idea that you say there's no narrative is also accurate in that, I'm not telling like Cotton is like a photo story about 10 days in the South. I took a drive from, I think, Atlanta to Memphis or something. And I drove around the South and took pictures of things.
Yeah.
I called it Cotton because the South is balanced on cotton in a certain way from 100 years ago. And that's what that's about. It has a tinge of photojournalism in it.
Yes, and that book intrigued me. That was something I wanted to talk to you about, Cotton, as well, because that was the first time I felt that you've tried to say something about history in a sense, but just you've tried to sort of say something within the narrative and the context of the book. And whether at the time you were doing that consciously or subconsciously, I'm not really sure, but it's an interesting book, actually.
Yeah.
And that's published is that the Tokyo publisher?
For Labo.
Yeah, 2021, yeah. Talk to me about how this came about, because I was really intrigued by it. Just, again, it's a very different Mark Cohen for me.
Well, I think the pictures are like 1990, maybe 92. I don't even remember. But, I had made the prints, and I made a few of them 16 by 20, and I made a bunch of 8 by 10s of them, and I didn't know what to do with them. But Yasunori Hokai, who's the guy that is the publisher, wanted, I met him in Paris, and I made the first book with him, which was Bread and Snow, and that's a color book. Then we made this Cotton book, and now we're making a book called Groundwork, which is new work, which will be a good. And many of them are pictures I made in Philadelphia. There are pictures like a piece of cabbage on the ground with snow on a cabbage leaf, and pictures of 3 pieces of bread by a puddle. And these are surrealistic pictures that I took walking. It's not like an in-your-face picture. It's in a garden picture. But they're made like in 1973. And what I did was did a shortcut to 2023 and made the same kind of pictures in Philadelphia of detritus all over Philadelphia, and started to make a book of that. So that book is groundwork.
Yeah.
When you see it, I hope you'll be able to publicize it.
What are you going to do with your archive, Mark? What's going to happen to your archive when you have to pass it on?
I don't know what my children will get it. I don't know.
It's a dilemma, isn't it? You're not alone. A lot of photographers I talk to are all who've got these amazing bodies of work throughout their lives. And they're sitting there thinking, what the heck am I going to do with this?
I don't know what I'm going to do, And it's like I'm not like unknown, It's like I can't go to the Met or the Getty and say, well, you can take all this away and I need some money. They said, well, they're interested in a gift, basically, most museums.
I noticed in one of your videos, the Ace Hoffman studio behind where you were shooting.
Really?
Yeah. And that in the time where you come from, they were quite a big studio setup, weren't they, Ace Hoffman?
Yes, they were. I never met Ace Hoffman, but he was quite a character up there. Well, I mean, they had this studio in Wilkes-Barre, and I used to buy everything. It was a camera store in the front and a studio in the back. They had guys that were like, they knew how to do the Hollywood lighting and how to make, big negatives and retouch them and make 1940 portraits of people.
Yeah, I had to do some research on them, on Ace Hoffman years ago. And it was just when I watched the video, the name, I said, there's Ace Hoffman. I forgot what it was, but it was many years ago. What's next then? You've got your book, you've got the new book. Any exhibitions planned?
No. I have 2 books that I think will come out within the next 6 months. I don't believe them until I see them.
Well, Mark, you've had 4 or 5 books out in the last 45 years, so you're doing all right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have. I was in a bunch of books about photography. That counts.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's next. I have to finish this color book, and then I'm going to go for a walk and take some more pictures.
I was wondering, are you still out shooting? Are you still out doing it?
Oh, yeah. There are pictures in the color book and pictures in the groundwork book that are 2024 pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the magic of the internet, I can send a scan to a printer in 5 minutes.
Do you feel social media has helped you?
I don't even know. I don't know. I know that the film of me taking pictures, that Michael Engler film, has been seen about 1 million times.
Yeah,
and it's an influential film because it shows you exactly how it worked. These guys came from the German TV crew, came to Wilkes-Barre, followed me around for an hour or about that. We went to different places. And I tried to show them exactly what I did. I had my flash with me, and
that's right.
And people saw that. And when I look at the comments that are underneath that, and a lot of people say, well, that guy's obnoxious. That's not right. You shouldn't be doing. And then there's an equal number of people say, well, that's really cool.
That's the nature of the beast now. And people sit behind their computers and do that, their keyboards and do that. I think when they start investigating you and looking at your work, sometimes negativity is a good thing in a way that might inspire somebody to find out more about who you are. I think it's very easy now to criticize without really understanding who you're criticizing.
The depth of the work is still pretty much unknown. Not the color work is known more, but the black and white work is known through Grimm Street, which is a very good approximation of the work. But it's like that, it's the tip of the iceberg.
It is.
There's a lot that are never shown. They're never seen that are good.
Do you ever get any commissioned work? Does anybody ever ring you up?
I did a fashion shoot. That never worked out because it was too artificial for me. They see my pictures and they, wow, this is really neat. They said, well, let's get them to do fashion work. So I went on a fashion shoot. I said, well, no, we can't use this stuff. But I think they should still use it because I think the fashion pictures that I sent them were pretty good. It might take them a few more years to see that.
Well, what you were saying there, the work which is out there of you is the tip of the iceberg. And that's one of the reasons I personally wanted to talk to you for a while. I didn't think you would do it. I thought you might have been bored with the people coming at you the same way. I love your work and I love your approach. I love the way you take on subject matter. And I think there's an honesty with the way you work. I've always liked that. I think maybe, this is just the beginning of other people getting to really understand who you are. Mark, it's been a pleasure and I'm really thankful you took the time to have a chat with me.
Great. I'm glad we talked and I hope you'll send me a link.
I will, definitely. And if you ever want to chat about anything else, you've got a project, just give us a shout.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
No worries. All the best. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.